You're writing a story and you're creating a world, but why is it really that important to get it right? What are some things you need to consider when creating a world, and how do you do it? We're going to talk about that today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for doing that. There's a couple links below that might be helpful to you. Let's not waste any more time. Let's jump in. It doesn't matter what kind of world you are creating for your story. You still have to create a world, even if it's set in modern day. There are rules and there are things that you are going to determine and decide, hey, is this going to be part of this world? In other words, are people going to use cell phones or not? Maybe, maybe not. Is this a world where people fly? Are there aliens? Is this in the past? Is this in the future? What do people believe about things? You are creating all of those things. So it doesn't matter, even if you're setting it in a modern world, you are thinking about and have to think about at least a little bit what kind of world you are creating. This is more true if you're creating a fantasy world or a science fiction world, something like that, where it's totally made up, totally creative. You are fully fleshing everything out. So why is it important that you have to think about it and get some of the details right? We could probably give a really long laundry list of why it's important to get it right, but I'm going to give you two that are audience related. So these are storytelling related elements here. First, people might really be intrigued by your story because of the world it creates. And this is one of the draws and things that pull us into stories is we get to go places and see things and watch things and participate in things that we could not do in our normal everyday walk around life. Like, I can go to a galaxy far, far away. I can go to another planet. I can go to the world of wizards. I can experience magic. I can fight zombies and vampires. I can do all of that stuff, which I don't get to do in real life. So that is one of the draws of creating a rich world, is your audience loves a rich world. We love the worlds of stories. So the first thing to think about when you're creating a world is you are essentially kind of wanting the audience to have a satisfying experience in this world, to feel like, hey, I love this world. I want to stay here. And that's one of the draws of helping an audience stay with your story. The second thing to realize, though, is if you don't get it right. So if you start having rules or laws or things within your world that you've created that contradict each other, your audience is quickly going to pick up on those and they're out. They're like, wait, why don't they just do this thing? I thought they could transport from here to there. Why can they not do that now all of a sudden? That doesn't make any sense. So if you start to do things in your story that contradict its own rules and laws essentially that you've established, the audience is going to check out. And this is probably one of the more important things about creating a world, is you have to think about it ahead of time. And this is why you think about it ahead of time. You think about what are the rules, what are the limits, what are the things that are involved in this world that I'm going to share with the audience. One of the things you have to do when you are creating a world is you have to do it before you start writing the story. You have to sit down and figure out, okay, what are the general rules? What are the guidelines? What are the things I need to be aware of before I even start writing one word? What are the rules of this world? What are the limits of this world? What can people do? What can they not do? Okay, are there aliens? Are there not? For example, like what is going on? What is allowed? What is not allowed in the world you're creating? Now, this is a trap, though, that ensnares many a writer, is you start going down the rabbit hole of creating this whole world and you start creating all this other stuff. I mean, people will reference Tolkien about, he created languages and all this kind of stuff. Okay, you don't have to create a language when you create a whole new world with another, an alien race or something like that. You don't have to do that. You need to know as much as you need to know to tell the story. Okay, that's it. That's all you have to create. So you just kind of need to first be aware of just kind of some of the general rules and guidelines and limits of what's going on. And that's really the first thing that you have to consider when creating a world. What is the nature of the world? What is allowed? What is not allowed? So let's just take a couple of space movies, for example, really quick. Okay, in Aliens, we're in space and guns are allowed and necessary for survival. Okay, in Armageddon, we've got this great scene of, you have a gun in space? Why do you have a gun in space? Like, no guns in space. There's no. Star Wars, we can use the Force. Star Trek, we can beam up, beam down. Now, all four of those stories primarily take place in space, but there's different rules, and the world, the nature of the world is very different in each of those. So first, think about the nature of the world. The second thing you have to think about is the nature of the main character. What is the main character like? What are the things that they are pursuing? What are the things that they are after? What are the things that matter to them? Those are the things that you should be highlighting. Those are the things that are important in the world. So if a main character is going after, let's say, a bad guy in a town, okay, we don't care what the political structure is of that country, where that town is. The town's in a state or a province or a county, whatever it is. Like, nobody cares, okay? And if you start thinking about, well, the president does this, or the prime minister does this and that, like, nobody cares. It's not relevant to the world because it doesn't impact the nature of the main character. The main character is just going to do their thing. So I need to think about the things that are connected to the main character. So I've got the world that the main character is inhabiting and the main character itself. So those two natures I've got to be thinking about. The last thing you need to be thinking about is you, the nature of the storyteller. There are things that you care about just in life in general that other people don't. It's what makes you unique. It's what makes you have a unique voice. Let's just say, for example, we created an outline for a story. Okay, so here's the story. This character is going after this, and we even kind of agree on the rules and nature of the world, and we agree on the nature of the main character. As soon as both you and I get involved in the story, I will tell a different story than you will, because at our core, there are some things that we probably care differently about. We both might care, for example, about justice, and we both might care for something like respecting each other. Okay, so maybe we both care about those things, but let's say you care about respecting each other. People should respect each other more than justice, and I care more about justice than about people respecting one another. Because of that, our stories are going to be fundamentally different. Your story is going to be focused on and have more of these elements of respecting people, whereas mine might have more elements of justice and equality and things like that. Now, they both still might be in the same realm, but they're going to be different. They're going to feel different because the storytellers involved, in this case you and I, are different. So the nature of the storyteller impacts the nature of the world and the nature of the main character. We infuse ourselves into those things. So the things that I care about is what gets brought out in the story. And you have to be understanding and realize that you are going to be on the page. Part of you is going to come out. That's just what's going to happen. So you have to be okay with that. And some writers are not okay with that. They're like, no, I don't like people knowing my stuff. I don't like people all up in my business. Well, too bad. You're a storyteller. You're going to come out on the page. So people are going to start to get to know you just a little bit more. And it's the nature of the storyteller that does that. So we have the nature of the world, we have the nature of the character, and we have the nature of the storyteller. Okay, Jake, but how do I do it? Like, what are some things I can do? What are some tips you have to help me write a better world and create a better world? Before I jump into that, just drop in the comments below, what are some worlds that you like? I'll start, like, I love the world of John Wick. It's super fun. I just love it. So if there's a world that you like, drop it below. Okay, I'm going to give you 4 tips pretty quickly. So here we go. Hang on. All right, tip number 1. Initially, like at the beginning of the story, before you start getting into anything weird, crazy, like doesn't matter if there's aliens, doesn't matter if there's magic or zombies or whatever it is, okay? Like whatever craziness is going on in the world that you are creating, one great tip is have something very early on that is very similar to our current world. What this does is it helps the audience connect to something because we find a commonality. It might not be very many commonalities. Like I don't get a whole lot about magic and stuff like that. Like I don't understand that because that's not part of my world, right? Like I don't have that in my world. But if I have something in that story that I can connect with initially, that helps bring me into the world and make me feel a little comfortable as an audience member. So one tip is early on, have something that is common with the audience that the audience can like latch onto. Like, oh, I get that. It's somebody going for a job interview. Like, oh, okay, it's a job interview. Oh, but it's on an alien spaceship. Okay, but I understand that job interview, so I can go along with the other. I'm not like distanced right away. I can still kind of relate to some of the things going on. So tip number 1, find some commonality. Tip number 2 is try to focus your world creation on the story. What are the things the story needs to function? Okay, so if the story needs X, Y, and Z, then all you got to do is figure out X, Y, and Z. You don't have to figure out JKL. Like, I don't need to know those things. Maybe I know them, but they're not going to be in the story. You, as the author, creator, are always going to know more about the world you are creating than what comes out in the story, because the story only needs elements of the world that help make the story make sense. So if it's not helping the story make sense, you can kind of disregard that. So focus your attention initially on things that are related to the world. The second thing, though, which is actually the third tip, is focus your world building on the character and the needs of the character. What is the character needing to do? What are they wanting to do? What is their goal in life? Maybe they want to pilot the said alien spacecraft. Like, that's what they ultimately want to do. So they're going as a job interview for, you know, some assistant pilot or something. I don't know. They're trying to do this, right? They're trying to work in. All I got to do is figure out what are the things related to the character. I don't need to know the political structure. I don't need to know the economic structure. Maybe I do. It's a job, right? So maybe a little bit of economics or how economics work. Maybe. But I don't have to know all of that. Focus your world building on things that relate to the story and things that relate to the character. Those two things are all you need. If there's something else, doesn't matter. Get rid of it. Don't even think about it. Don't waste your time thinking about it if it's not related to those things. So you do have to kind of understand your character and your story, and then you start figuring out the world and what are the rules and what are the things. You make some tweaks, and then you can start writing. The last tip I will give you, show, don't tell. Now, you've heard that before. I know you've heard that before. I'll link a video up here about show, not telling. So watch that if you need to. But you want to show, not tell people. Don't get into a character explaining about the world. Just let us see it. What happens? How does this work? How does this work? How does this happen? And if you can start showing and not telling, what that does is that lets the audience participate in the discovery of the world. It helps them fall in love with the world itself, and oh, this is how that works. This is how this works. This is how this works. I mentioned earlier I love the world of John Wick. One of the things that happens is there's these little gold coins that people use to pay each other, but no one really ever explains what they are. No one explains why it's 1 or 2 or why you give 5 or whatever, and the importance. Like, you just know they're important. You know they're part of the world. That's it. We're just shown. Nobody tells us. And that's why showing and not telling is so rich and so vital in storytelling. So find ways to show about your world, not tell. If you can do that, you'll be well on your way. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. If it has, please be sure to like, subscribe, bell, all that stuff. I really appreciate it. Thank you for doing that. When you go to tell a story, whether you're building, well, you're going to be building a world. So build a good world, okay? But when you go tell that story, tell a story that matters. See you later.